this music is actually older music that has been marinating, in that these are burdens that have been sustained burdens for a long time that I've been quiet about. So it will be less forecasting and more. This is actually going to be, let me break my silence because there are other things I want. So the book of Jude, the letter, the epistle of Jude says, I want to talk about our common faith, but because of some threats, I have to veer off from that and talk about contending for our faith. This is sort of like me. I had written I got a bunch of material. I had titled it Flame On. It was going to be about rekindling affections that I believe were waning. Not threats, but just dwindling affections, shifting affections. So I was writing that. Then I began to notice that we were starting to, that basically I was just surveying. I said, man, there seems to be a confusion about what happens when we arrive where we ultimately said we were going. So let's just say people say, man, we want to reach, and then they start talking about all the people they want to reach. We want to reach the industry, man. We tired of just doing youth groups and, you know what I'm saying, Bible camps. Man, we want to go and we want to reach. But then you ever notice when people reach, or if people reach, who they reach, it seems like it's just reaching just ends up being, that's my man. So I was like, man, what happens when we who belong to Christ and have been set apart for bearing his name and spreading his fame, what would it look like if we encountered those who are not operating under that same banner? Is there an encounter, and what would it look like? I see kind of what it looks like, but what it looks like seems like it falls short of what happens. I listened to interviews of some of the secular people who now know about so-called Christian rappers or rappers who happen to be Christians. I never get the sense they're more educated on Christian hip hop at all. They say the same thing they used to say, because I ain't really heard much Christian rap, but what I've heard is whack. I've been hearing that for 15 years. I ain't heard much, and what I heard was whack. You mean that? I guarantee you they have not been exposed to Christian hip hop, and nor have they been more exposed to Christian hip hop now that certain Christians who do hip hop have been there. These people are not like, man, ever since I got onto you, I started peeping all the dudes that you roll with. You never hear that, because there's something wrong with what they think the encounter. Well, not something wrong. I would say something wrong, but there's something about the encounter that does not include exposing them to the treasury that exists. You never hear them sound like, last time you were here, you were trying to help us to understand Christian understanding. You were talking about we ain't had the words of life, and you come to bring it. How you gonna come on our radio? It's never an encounter that unpacks what changed lives. It's always just a sprinkle of, so what's going on with you? So this project that I want to put out is really a campaign I want to launch to say, when those that belong to Christ encounter those that do not, when those who are submitted and surrendered to the King meet those who are not under that lordship, not operating under that lordship, what happens? What would we say? What kind of dialogues would we have? What kind of stands would we take? So I've titled it, When Sacred Meets Secular, right? Originally, and this is good, it was sacred versus secular. I remember when I was infused with a sense of combative, sacred versus secular. Let's show them that we're on opposite sides and we don't play that. That's sort of how I originally started thinking of it. But as a result of really seeing that the sacred and the secular are not inherently in combat, I think they are eventually in combat, but not inherently. So what that means is the sacred person doesn't come on the field ready to fight with his fist balled up. He comes in peace. Jesus said, when you go to some place, seek a person of peace. He says, if you find it, peace will rest on him. You'll get good ministry out of him till it's time to move on. So if you don't find it, he didn't say fight. He didn't say argue. He said just shake the dust off your feet and keep moving. So sacred versus secular, this new music will be basically like my take on the need for there to be not a combat but an encounter. And may God give grace when we encounter, as we talk about the church in positive light, when we are talking about them, as we talk about our communion with other Christians and other Christians who use hip hop positively, when we say check us out. We have a God. We want you to have him. Our God's in the building tonight. One of the joints I have, right? Like our God, we talk about us having something that we want you to partake of. We have treasure that we want you to have. We don't even come like we all have it. I think that's a false statement. Like we're all the same and we all have it. We're not. One of us has been transferred, or some of us have been transferred to something. And who talks like that when they make it? Who talks like that when they're interviewed? Who thinks this is the moment when we hit them to what we just witnessed at this conference at Legacy? When you want all the heavyweights of hip hop to be in the room and experience what we experienced, some people wouldn't. They're like, they're gonna think that's whack. We don't want them here. They don't want to be here. So what? We want to be in the club? We want to be with them? No, we want them to be where we are. If not, we should change what we're doing. Because if what we're doing is not what we hope to bring people into, why are we here? Well, that's why a lot of people are not here. Because we're not even thrilled. We're not finding our true joy and satisfaction here. We're here probably more out of religious duty than delight. For some people, this is where the money is. That's why they're here. And when the money ceases, they will cease. But this joint, when sacred meets secular, I think people are going to hear my take on what would happen when that which is surrendered to God encounters those that are not. And we're going to proclaim to them, we have something we want to invite you to, and you'll find deep satisfaction in it if God be gracious. And if he doesn't, brush the dust off.